Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world, welcome to the third and final season of the World Championship Series. This is the Premier League, and we are live from Katowice in Poland. And joining me in Poland is, of course, In Control and Todd on the desk. Welcome to Europe, Jeff, once again. And Todd, welcome back to another season, another round.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to be here. So far, so good this season. Fantastic. A massive season that we've had so far. And the final season before BlizzCon. A lot on the line now, Jeff, as we get closer to the global finals.
That is the big prize at the end of this rainbow. Going to BlizzCon, of course, is the biggest tournament in StarCraft history every year. But even just more than that, great prize pool, amazing points. This is kind of signing off on HOTS. We got Legacy of the Void coming up, so you want to be remembered. This is one of those big final tournaments to say, hey, I did something great in 2015.
The final time I can have the pleasure of doing this, let's take a look at the season structure, the tournament structure for the Premier League. We've had the round of 32 in America and Germany. We've completed and brought the 16 best players this season to Poland, where we have spread them across 4 groups going through A, B, C, and D. We have 3 days of awesome action here in Katowice before going to the playoffs. The top 8 players this season will go and play in a live venue in front of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of StarCraft fans to see who will be the #1 in Season 3. We also, of course, want to be looking at what exactly we're doing over the next couple of days. Let's take a look at the schedule here, because today, Tuesday the 8th, we have Groups A and B to be played, or at least to be started. We'll be doing matches 1 and matches 2 in the groups, and of course the winner match. We will have 2 players that qualify for the playoffs today. And then tomorrow we have a replica of a day. We have C and D before Thursday, where we'll have all the elimination matches and decider matches to wrap up our shows in the studios in Katowice before going to the big venue here in Krakow. We go to a live audience for the weekend, the playoffs, and of course the official release of the Legacy of the Void World Premiere. An awesome weekend ahead of us.
They do not mess around when they make those videos. Like, the announcement of showing off the intro for Legacy of the Void is sick. I remember way back when I was like 12 years old watching Warcraft 2. That video was amazing too, with the orc and the guy killing each other on the grass. It was so great.
And we have special guests coming from around the world. Johan, we have Chris Sigaty's coming from America. We have also Jason Huck, who's traveling over as well. Some lead designers in StarCraft 2 at Blizzard Entertainment. And you can't help but wait for Sunday.
Absolutely. If you're a StarCraft fan, Protoss or not Protoss, even though it's Legacy of the Void, this is going to be the place to be, and everybody wants to see it, man.
And as we look forward to the playoffs this weekend, we have a lot of prize money as we get closer and closer to finding out who gets the cherry on top of the cake, the $30,000 first place, but more importantly, $217,000 spread across just the 32 players that we have playing in Season 3. Likewise, of course, for Season 2 and Season 1, we had the same. A lot of prize money on the line, but more importantly, of course, throughout the year, we've been following this very closely. It is the backbone of the World Championship Series. It is the points, and we are very close to locking up 16 players that will play at the Global Finals. Let's take a look at the players that are playing across the next couple of days, the ones highlighted, or at least a little bit more brighter for you to see, the 8 players that are playing today. And some players have a massive shot at massive success over the next couple of days.
A lot of eyes are going to be on players like Lilbo, Jaedong, Snoot, to name a few. I think Marine Lord's on the outside chance there as well. They need to not just do well, they need to pretty much win this tournament. And that sounds ridiculous, but of all the players we just named, those are some of the guys that can do that. They haven't yet, so it's certainly still kind of one of those possibilities, one of those storylines we're going to be watching, but man, do they need to do it.
And if they need to do it, Todd, that means they have to beat the likes of Hydra and Poland, who, as you can see here, ranked 6th and ranked 11th, respectively.
It's going to be difficult, but definitely doable, I think, for some of these players. In particular, Lilbo and Snoot, the 2 best chances here that we have in order to possibly have a non-Korean qualifying for the finals, but it's still a very long shot.
All right, let's take a look at the groups now. We have 4 groups where we've spread the 16 players from the round of 32 across. The cream of the crop has to be, of course, in Group C, a very difficult group, but what stands out there, Jeff? What group, what set of players are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at players all up and down the different ranges. Like, I like some of the mini storylines we have here. Mana playing today, playing in front of a smaller Polish audience, but fighting for the chance to perhaps represent Poland in Krakow, where there is going to be a much larger audience and a bigger prize pool to be fighting for. But then there's other players too that are fighting for kind of redeeming themselves. Jaedong, a guy that we continuously named, who's been in the Premier League, but has really not had that performance that you expect of a player of his caliber.
Yeah, I think it's a great variety of nationalities and race as well within StarCraft. Definitely a few less Protosses than usual here in WCS, but I guess the Zergs and Terrans, they've just been doing good, which doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have a Protoss champion.
Who will be the champion of this season? It's not too far away from finishing, just a couple of days. Let's take a close look now at Group A, because this is the group that we're going to be starting with today. Group A holds 4 different countries: Poland, France, Finland, and Sweden. The second game of the evening is going to be Elfie versus Marine Lord. First match is going to be Mana versus Zanster. Is there a clear favorite?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, especially if you look at the group in its entirety, you say Marine Lord is one of the guys that needs to make it out of here, but Elfie on that 9th cat life, I mean, Zanster, a really up and down young player, he's only 18 years young, and then Mana, who's 21 years ancient. He's been around the pro gaming scene forever, but still is only 21 years old.
Is Elfie a complete wild card here coming into this group? Of course, he was a player that kind of came into the round of 32 as a replacement, is now playing in the season finals here in Poland too.
I think he's absolutely a wild card. He's unpredictable. If you have to play against him, even as Marine Lord, who I do think is the favorite here in this group, it's going to be so hard to, I guess, look at Elfie and be like, he's probably going to do that and that, and I'm going to counter it. You kind of know the style he's going to play, but knowing exactly what build is going to be the difficulty within the matchup.
All right,
but
well,
even like the style is like, I know that he's going to be crazy. I mean, who knows what he's going to come out with? So
I mean, we've seen a lot of
crazy.
We've seen a lot of crazy over the last couple of seasons, and Elfie seems to be the player to bring it today. Our first matchup is going to be Mana versus Zanster. The first player we're going to introduce has the weight of a nation on his shoulders.
I play mainly Protoss. Mainly. Yeah, because I play off-race sometimes. When I hear Poland, I always think about my nation. We have a lot of history, and I always wanted Poland to be one of the biggest esports countries. We are always there for IEM now, and I'm very happy about it. And I want it to be as big as it is, or even bigger. When I realized that WCS is in Poland, I was sitting with my girlfriend in the room, and I just stood up, started shaking because I was not expecting that, and I was the most excited for a very long time. This was a crucial point in my gaming career. My goal is to pass round of 16, and if I can make it, then I will play in Krakow in front of a crowd of the good old Polish community.
As heavy as the weight on his shoulders is, Jeff, as heavy it is, what motivation coming into today?
I mean, it's everything. Playing in front of your live audience, it's not that common for a player like Mana to be saying, well, I'm going to play on a big stage in front of Polish people. But also, I mean, again, we're talking about this too. Maybe BlizzCon's not the possibility for him, but this is the big tournament. And it's like, we talk constantly about Lilbo's final finish against Hydra. He didn't even win that tournament, but just making it to the top 2 is a big deal. For all these players, there's so much to be won here, and for Mana, it's no different.
Something lit up inside, as you mentioned in the video. As soon as he knew that the WCS was coming to Poland, Todd, everything changed.
Yeah, and this is a guy that has been around for a long time, that's been a very strong player in the, I guess, the worldwide scene that we have in StarCraft 2 for a long time as well. And he has a huge winning record, actually, against Zanster. So going into this match here, you can tell how much he wants it here to try and qualify and play in front of his home crowd.
Well, as much as Zanster is new blood to the World Championships, he was a player that we should not count out.
I play StarCraft 2 competitively because it forces you to grow as a person, and you get to meet a lot of nice people and travel the world. When I tell people I'm a pro gamer, they usually react very positively and ask a lot of questions about it. I didn't really have an idol growing up, but when I started playing StarCraft, I really liked Lucera and watching his stream on OWN TV back in the days. The worst way to lose a match is when you just do one huge mistake randomly, like cancelling a hatchery, for example. My goal this season is to beat everyone I'm supposed to beat, which I've failed in previous seasons to do.
It's his first Premier League appearance. He's mean and he's keen and he's looking to make a difference.
Zanster comes from Sweden, which is a country with a long history of champions across multiple games in esports. So he's going to have a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. I'm sure all the Swedish spectators that are going to be watching this, they want to pull for him, they want him to go through. But he's a young guy on the rise. Can he do it? I guess.
Yeah. And Todd, to your point, which I think is really cool, we've seen a lot of these young players come up and do really well because their national scene is doing real well. Todd's talked a lot about the French players in the past, kind of doing well inner squad-like, and Zanster's kind of a product of that. They've got the Swedish Championship, which has a huge prize pool, but really competitive players as well. And all of a sudden, here he is, round of 16, WCS, and he's looking to go further.
And there's a realistic chance he can make it out this group.
The Swedish Championship, which I believe he won the last one in finals against Sortov, so definitely doing very well within Sweden as well.
Yeah,
And to your, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeff, please.
I was just going to say, I mean, he is looking to get outside this group. This is not an impossible group for him. He talks about how Protoss is kind of his worst matchup, but if he can get past those butterflies today and really beat Mana, he is the better Protoss in this group. I think Elfie would be considered the second one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Zanster comes in and as fierce and as keen as he is to do well, he goes up against a player who, in the round of 32, let nothing get past him because he knew what was on stake. And very similar, qualifying for Katowice, in Mana's mind, he wants to go to Krakow to play in the grand finals, or at least the main event for the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. At the same time, though, if you're in Mana's shoes here, you had to practice for multiple matchups, whereas Zanster only for 2 matchups, having 2 Protosses here in the group. So maybe that's going to give him some kind of advantage, worst matchup or not.
I mean, Zanster said it in his winner's interview in the round of 32. He did not want to play against Protoss players coming into the round of 16.
You know, I mean, I try not to read too far into that because a lot of guys have their worst matchup, their weaker matchup, but they're still pro gamers. They still play 10 hours a day. He's well equipped. He's fine.
All right, let's take a look at the map order now. So, of course, in this best of 3, we're going to have 3 maps, 2 vetoes each for the players, and then the map selection coming up. How important are these maps that we're going to be looking at are going to shape this Zerg versus Protoss, Todd?
I think they're pretty important for both players. This is probably the maps that they've pictured, unless something crazy happened, that they've pictured would be picked. And in the end, with Terraform, Coda, and Iron Fortress, I don't think there's anything too crazy. Usually, you kind of always see Iron Fortress being one of the later maps in a series like this because there is other maps that you need to prioritize and veto in a match.
That's a difficult last map, though. If we do go to 3 maps, if it is a 1-1 and it goes to the decider, that's not an easy map for Mana and for Protoss.
It's not easy because taking the third is strategically very difficult, but to be honest, historically, Mana is not much in the way of a third Nexus kind of Protoss. So while it kind of reveals a little bit of his tendencies, I think he's quite strong there, so he should be okay if it goes to Game 3.
If it does, but it definitely will go to Game 1, obviously. Let's take a look at Terraform as the starting map between these 2 players. Terraform's a map that is relatively new. It's come into Season 3 of the World Championship Series. Talk to me about Zerg versus Protoss on this map, especially when you're looking at it from a Protoss side of things here, Todd.
Terraform is a map where taking a third base will not be as difficult as on some of the other maps, but if somehow you fall behind, it can be really hard to defend in the area. But other than that, we see a lot of standard games. One of the things that Mana needs to watch out is that sometimes he's come into some of these WCS games with a plan that was a little bit too fancy, like being super aggressive against Firecake. I really remember that series vividly, where he was trying to be overly aggressive and it played against him and he ended up losing. So now against somebody like Zanster, who's very good in late game, maybe you should try it and make something happen in the mid game rather on 3 bases.
Is there a side here, Jeff, that you'd be looking at to make a difference? Because you can go into a game of StarCraft saying, you know, I'm going to play my normal game and see what the opponent's going to do. Do you think one of these 2 is going to come into this saying, okay, I'm going to put him on edge, I'm going to do something different?
You know, for both their playstyles, I don't necessarily think so, and I do think Terraform kind of goes towards that let's get the butterflies out of our stomach format. Okay. It's not a super zany map, and both these players play against each other quite a bit on the ladder. They're both European, they're both in around a lot of these tournaments. I don't think anything too crazy will come out Game 1.
Okay, so something that we're bringing new this time to the Premier League is predictions. We've got a lot of talent at this event, and of course our wonderful observer, Funker, who's come to join us in predicting throughout the week, every single game. We're going to be keeping score this time. We actually are going to be keeping score of who thinks who is going to win. I hope you guys are keeping score at home as well. You can join in with us here at the World Championship Series, as we've got a massive landslide, obviously, towards Mana here. We got 6 votes to 2. 2 for Zanster, and it is Kalaris and Rotterdam that choose Zanster, but everyone else is on the pole side.
You know, it's a little bit rough. A lot of us know the European scene really well. Rotterdam, recently having moved to North America, has kind of fallen off the map in that knowledge pool, so we'll let it slide this time, but I think this is going to be a fun way to track and kind of see where we're all at with these players.
The best thing about this is that we didn't include Autosys, not to spoil it.
Yeah, we couldn't
Just
include
assume
them.
it's, whoever loses is pretty much the guy he's
Todd, are you going to come out ahead of Jeff in these across the week?
Of course.
Yeah?
Come on.
All right, well, we'll have to keep track of that. Remember, at home, if you want to join us in, you can. You can join us in social media and tell us who you think is going to win. Make sure to go to Twitter. It's always, of course, hashtag WCS. That is us done here on the analysis desk. It is time to kick off the round of 16 here in the Premier League, and the first match is going to be casted with Rotterdam and Nathanius.
First Polish player coming up to play here in Katowice as we get ready to kick off the round of 16. Roddy, got a nice PVZ ahead of us.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good series, and I do think a very close one as well. I have indeed fallen off a little bit when it comes to the European meta, but overall, Nate, I think it's going to be a really good series. Statistically, though, Mana has a very, very good record against Zenster. He has won 5 out of 6 encounters, and 4 of them were actually in 2015, so we're not talking about 2013, 2012 victories. He has won the last 5 series in a row, most of them best of 3, one even a best of 7, best of 9, you know, so Mana is looking good on paper, and I would say maybe he's a small favorite, but I've just been a fan of Zenster, man, ever since that amazing series in Challenger. I'm rooting for the Swede over here. I'm just having a feeling.
It's time to find out who's going to take the first map here in the World Championship Series round of 16. We're loaded into Terraform. In the bottom right position as the blue Zerg player, we have Team Properties Zanster.
And over here on the left top side of Terraform for our first match in WCS Premier League round of 16. He's hailing from Poland and of course representing Liquid, it is Mana.
Must feel so good to come represent his home country in his home country. And this is the point where if you're Mana, you're not just thinking about money or WCS points. You want to play on the big stage in front of your country. That's the dream, Roddy.
Absolutely, and he's had such a good run as well in this season of WCS Premier League. Interesting route that the drone is taking here. Fonka already on the money. We've barely started and Fonka's already on the money, yo.
Keeping his eyes on this drone as it slips around. Mana's just going for a regular probe scout after throwing down that gateway. What is this cheeky drone looking for?
I'm not 100% sure. There are a couple of crazy builds on Terraform. A proxy hatchery is not super uncommon on Terraform.
In this spot, Roddy?
No, there. Yeah, I wasn't finished yet, Nate. Like, it's not super uncommon taking a gold base like Fonka is showing, or just doing it in the Protoss natural. But doing it over here, that's a little bit weird. Mana is scouting right now. The probe's like, okay, there is no natural. I'm gonna check the main base. No crazy early pool, because there is an extractor going down. Whereas the spawning pool, I don't even see it yet. If I'm Mana right now, Nate, I'm convinced that he's taking the gold base.
All right, so we've been able to deduce Mana knows that something is up.
Yep.
But what kind of play can Zanster make with this if Mana's still going for this fast Nexus? Is this hatchery that he's placed at that third area for an aggressive push, or is it just to mess with him?
No, it's definitely for an aggressive push. It's something, he's extremely committed now already. This is not something that you can transition out of very easily without taking any economic damage. Mana checks this right now, and now I would start getting seriously worried. Like, what is going on? Is he going to check the high ground here? Maybe Mana has played against this. I haven't yet. This is one of the first times I see it. Well, there we go. Mana knows that this is going on. What I'm kind of expecting, Nate, I'm not 100% sure, but it's just a queen as soon as possible. Spread a couple of creep tumors towards the low ground, and then start getting spines and queens working on that wall off that Mana will most likely throw down on the low ground. But some Protoss players actually say whenever you play against something like this, it's better not to build too many buildings over here, because there is a good chance you end up losing those buildings.
It's really crazy, you know, with so much at stake, and you mentioning the match history between these two guys head to head favors Mana so strongly. Is this the type of strategy that he can actually win in an unfavored scenario with? Do you think this is the right play?
I mean, like, it all depends about the execution and of course about how Mana defenses as well. It's a cool way to shake things up though, because you put a little bit of fear in your opponent, right? Like, if this is how game number 1 starts off, what's going to happen in game number 2 or even game number 3, you know, if we go to Iron Fortress, where I want to agree totally with the boys on the analysis desk, by the way, that if it goes to map number 3, I think that is a very good map for Zenster.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I mean, he's starting to do a little bit of work on this wall. The first photon cannon gets put behind this. Some mothership core is going to try to push these lings back. And even now, this queen is going to be very difficult to deal with as that zealot gets lower and lower.
Yep, and that's going to allow a little bit more surface area on this pylon as well for these lings. It's nothing but lings on the production tab, so it's no spine crawler, it's no, you know, crazy Hydra transition contain. It's just basically a Zergling all in. The queen should be able to take out that first pylon, but now there is a cannon up, and of course that mothership core is gathering energy for photon overcharge as well. And I really like it if Mana lets that pylon finish. Just go for the full wall off, man. Like, you're good over here. You don't need to worry about leaving your base. You need to worry about not dying early on. And I think as long as Mana not dies, really soon he should be in a very good position.
And the lings are getting to work on this gateway, trying to break in. There is still one force field available. Another pylon gets thrown up. There's the force field, locking a few of these lings away as two of them slip onto that cannon. But that queen does want to stay outside of the cannon's range, so it's just Zerglings. What does Mana need to do to hold this?
Just more sentries, and I would go in an extra cannon as well, but let's not forget, he still has photon overcharge. I think Mana is doing more than fine. He's up 4 workers, he's basically up a base, because Zenser is never going to use that base to mine from. Don't lose your mothership core, because that's when it will all come crumbling down. Lings will start working on the cannon and the sentry, but there is plenty of force field available, and there is still that photon overcharge, and he's so patient with that photon overcharge. I'd almost say maybe a tiny bit too patient, but Mana seems very confident and so far very composed. I think he's handling this excellently.
Yeah, saving that energy so that when the next big flood comes, he'll still have that overcharge available. The mothership core takes a lot of damage, down to 31 hit points, but one of the queens gets taken out, really hindering the amount of pressure he can put on that mothership core.
Mana has still not used photon overcharge. A couple of links get the surround right now on the sentries. That's very good news for Zenster, but force fields will save the day for now. And I mean, Mana's just in a phenomenal position. He's up 10 workers now, still has photon overcharge, and I feel that Zenster is starting to run out of steam. Unless he can get all the links through and run into the main base. 2 links will pick off 1 more sentry, but this just doesn't really look very scary right now.
Yeah, I mean, the next wave of lings is going to come forward. Warp Gate is about to finish. We still have consistent probe production, consistent sentry production, and as you mentioned time and time again, Roddy, there's enough energy for him to use the photon overcharge to help create a large buffer in his natural, and if the lings were to somehow get by into his main, he still has the option of overcharging that as well.
And he could even fight with probes right now, Nate. This is one of those scenarios where even if Mana ends up losing 15 to 16 workers, he's still even in workers, which is still a good scenario because he's still on 2 bases against 1. Mana right now taking his 3rd and 4th gas. Of course, we have information to all the numbers. Mana doesn't, so he might be a tiny bit confused, but Mana is experienced enough to know that he's in a very good position right now and that he has to do something very silly. Look at the amount of links that have died.
66 Zerglings for 3 sentries and a Zealot, and 1 probe.
The Burrow is going down now. I am not sure what the idea is behind that one.
I guess at this point, he may be so flustered by the pressure not working and realizes he needs to throw something else in there to try to create an opportunity.
Yep. Mana just had a very good opening, and above all, he handled it all so well. You know, that Zealot never went off position, that Zealot saved so much time, then he just re-walled himself in, and he was so cautious, you know, with the force fields, with the weapons, not losing any units, not letting any links sneak by. It's going to be a Baneling bust, so maybe he wants to burrow a couple of Banelings outside of the main base and hope that the sentries walks over it, but that all seems like that seems like a little bit of a dream scenario right now.
That's a high risk, high reward play. It'd be very interesting to see how that one exactly works out, as the Spine's going to try to start nibbling on the front of that wall. More Zerglings in production. And that War Prism, though, this is a really big power play unit for Mana to put the pressure back on him, because all those units are so aggressively postured. How is he supposed to defend this?
There's almost nothing at home for Zenster, and I think the moment that Zenster is going to spot this War Prism, he needs to have these links in position immediately, but they just leave. Yeah,
just warps in Zealot straight into his base. There's 2 sentries here, at least 3 more force fields to block this off. And as long as he places it, he's good. GG. Mana takes game number 1 here for Group A of the World Championship Series, round of 16.
And that's such a sweet way as well to start off your WCS Premier League round of 16, Nate. You get kind of cheesed in game number 1 and you just don't mess up. You handle it all with such calm, such elegance, I would even say. He didn't even use Photon Overcharge against an all-in play from a Zerg. That's impressive, Nate. That doesn't happen very often.
Very impressive to be able to win in a scenario like that, and I really like you pointing that out. To start your round of 16 performance, immediately the heat's turned on, the pressure is raised up against you, and just completely stoic, in the face of danger, not really sweating it. You know, he had the fast probe scout. He saw no natural, saw the fast gas, was like, okay, just get my wall up, hold it with sentries, and it was just really well done.
Yep, absolutely. There's really not a whole lot more we can say about that. Kind of wonder why Zenster would bust out a play like that. I guess the whole idea behind this build is just you put on some pressure immediately with the queen, with your first few links, maybe hope for an extremely early photon overcharge, or what you hope for is that the first links that kind of squeeze by, but I don't think he really wanted the links to squeeze by because he couldn't do that much with the links, and they were bound to die because the mothership core was just shooting away at them, and there was no chance of Zenster saving those links. And it sounds very silly that 3 or 4 links can make the difference, but sometimes it does in breaking down that wall. And this is one of these builds for a Zerg player that the moment that wall goes down, the moment you cancel that gate, or in time, like if 10, 15 links run by, that's when it becomes very tricky for Protoss, right? Because you have like 1 or 2 units, and then you have to chase down a bunch of very fast links that run around in your main, and that's when things can become very complicated. But that never happened for Mana, so we never saw him in that scenario, and he was just, keep renewing that wall, cannon up, force shoot here, force shoot there. I've got this, ease.
Yeah, really, really well played. And now they're going on to map number 2. It's going to be Coda. Bit of a, very straightforward map. This is the most popular map that we've seen played out basically since its introduction into the World Championship Series. Pretty standard layout, would you say, Kev?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of like this map for Mana. Also, the way that I've seen him play PvZ in the past, I feel that he's just very confident around it all along. Like, I don't really see him mess up too often, and I kind of feel the way that Zenster has been vocal about this matchup in the past, where saying that, I don't like ZVP all that much right now. I personally feel this is my weakest matchup. Coda is not really a map that you want to play on because it's a match where most Protoss players are very comfortable on. And it's going to be hard for Zenster to reach what he likes in this matchup, and that mostly comes down to Ultralisk that are well upgraded, Vipers, and Infestors. But of course, it's very hard to get there for a Zerg player.
Yeah, and now he's up against a Protoss who's in the zone, who's feeling it.
Yeah,
he's got a home field advantage. And as you mentioned, that head-to-head matchup record very well. Mana went through a lot of PvZ to actually get here from the round of 32, whereas Zenster didn't actually have to play any Protoss to get to this position. But now he needs to make it happen. We are loading in to game number 2. We are ready to go here at the World Championship Series Premier League round of 16. 2 men face off in the northwest position of Coda. We have the blue Protoss player currently up 1-0, and representing Team Liquid, he's Mana.
Of course, on the right bottom side of Coda, we are looking right now at the main base of our red Zerg player. He is hailing from Sweden. It is Zenster. Team Properties' very own Zenster, of course. Nate, since game number 1 started off so explosively and we didn't really have a whole lot of time to introduce the players and talk about their run so far in WCS Season 3, but if I think back of Challenger of this season, these may have very well been the 2 players that stood out the most for me. Of course, Mana had that remarkable comeback against Happy, where he was down 0-2, and we all knew that Mana wanted to make it to at least the round of 16, but preferably the round of 8 or further so badly. Being down 0-2 in Challenger and then turning it around, that was just an amazing story and an amazing performance. And of course, Zenster played that absolutely phenomenal game against Firecake. Perhaps still the best game of WCS Season 3 so far. So these are really 2 names that stood out of Challenger this season, and it's very fun to see them go up against each other in the round of 16 over here.
Yeah, it's cool, especially in the context of where we are in WCS at this moment. So much has been on the line. Season 1, 2, 3. We're at the point where these aren't 2 players that really have that good. We're not going to see them playing in the global finals. It's all about putting it on and having a good finish to this year. 2 guys that have been counted out for the most part, but want to get as far as they can.
This drone being annoying, I of course absolutely agree. For Mana, there is so much more on the line than just money. But of course for Zenster as well, this is a very unique opportunity for Zenster to have that one run that people will always bring up. Maybe next year we'll be playing Legacy of the Void. And then if Zenster does well, it's like, well, this doesn't come out of nowhere. Don't you guys remember WCS Season 3 where Zenster maybe made a quarterfinals or even a semifinals? That would be the best performance of his career by far. For Mana, Mana has to do extremely well for us to make a statement like that, because Mana has won Premier League tournaments in the past.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you see what happens. Like everybody here is fighting for something different at the World Championship Series, and it's really cool, especially in the context of this group where you have a guy like Marine Lord who is swinging for the fences.
Hey, I see 4 probes on the gas. Funka sees 4 probes on the gas. My jimmies are getting rustled right now.
It's definitely something that can be triggering to the eye, as his Overlord's going to come up and scout the natural. We do have that link speed opening. Does Zanster have to play aggressively in this map to make something happen? If he lets Mana macro up, is he in a bad spot?
Not necessarily in a bad spot, but I do feel the way that Zanster plays in general, not just in ZVP, but in most matchups, is that he's very active with a lot of units. You know, a lot of Zerg players always have the approach of, I'm going to try to wait as long as possible to create units, so my economy is as strong as possible, and obviously that's kind of the way that Zerg plays out. But Zanster has always been the type of guy that makes a big swell of links, or sometimes even roaches or Hydralisk, in a phase of the game where you normally not necessarily expect it, and then just tries to create an advantage situation for himself, and then macros up further behind it. He's definitely a macro-oriented player, but he has a little bit of a different approach than most Zergs out there.
All right, well, he's going to go up to a quick 3 bases, as we tend to see. And as far as Protoss versus Zerg goes, you know, you mentioned a lot of Protoss players very comfortable on this map. Roddy, what do Protoss players tend to go for in the mid game? Is it still a lot of that heavy Blink Stalker Sentry play?
Yeah, I kind of think that's the most common thing over here, and I'd be shocked to see something different, especially with that second Sentry. It could maybe be... wow, that's a very quick robotics facility, by the way. 5 minutes and 55 seconds. If these links spot it, and they do, Zensur's going to be able to click on it. I feel this is an absolutely massive scout for Zensur. That's normally not that easy to scout. Scouting a big building like the robotics facility this early on, that's great. Mana is just gonna drop some gateways and complete his wall up. Of course, he doesn't have any eyes on the map at all, and after the way that Zanster played in game number 1, I kind of felt this opening was even a little bit risky, because speed is done already. Imagine if Zanster would have made a crazy amount of links, he would have been able to just run them in. But Mana was very confident that was not going to happen.
Yeah, certainly some possible gambles to be thrown around here, as a Forge will also start up.
So what do you think is going to happen over here, Nate? Quick Warp Prism perhaps by Mana?
It worked really well last game, and there it is, Warp Prism. And you know, he does this with a little bit of a later +1. You can always try to follow up with that Twilight Council, and I guess if you can slow the Zerg down enough, you still open up that window for the Blink Stalker timing.
Yeah, but I feel that this is more a 2-base oriented play over here by Mana. I feel that even though he's getting a Forge, I kind of feel that he wants to Warp Prism to use to force out some units on the other side of the map, and then maybe set himself up.
He did have the Immortals already in production on Terraform, so that's a pretty good guess, I'd say.
Yeah, this could very well be a very strong Immortal follow-up. He's going to slow the Zerg down a little bit with the Warp Prism play, and then followed up with a strong Immortal push. We're going to keep a close eye on that worker production tab, see if Mana stops at 44 or 46. If he goes higher than that, then he probably has 3-base ambitions.
Yeah, and that Warp Prism's moving out. It does have 2 sentries in it. Not exactly aiming towards that main base ramp like we saw on Terraform, which, you know, he's kind of go straight for the throat, but here it comes over to the 3rd base. We have 14 drones. There's a lot at stake at this 3rd. Going to force field in the Queen. Great use of those force fields to grab that Queen. The Zealots should be able to kill that. No +1 just yet, so it's more about the control of the positioning here, as they won't be two-shotting those Zerglings yet.
Yep, I want to be careful with your sentries over there. Mana almost ends up losing one, but he picks it up in just the nick of things. He's going to drop the sentries again. We'll end up losing 1 sentry this time. How many drones is he getting in? Not a whole lot, right? I mean, it's great positioning for the Zealots, especially after taking down this Queen. These Lings have a very, very hard time cleaning up these Zealots, but now the Roaches will come in to reinforce, and after just losing 2 drones, but of course making a lot of workers, Zanster is going to be fine for now, or making a lot of units. The Immortal is a follow-up. Twilight Council is going down, though, Nate.
Yeah, well, you said it, Kev. He is still building probes at this point, and it's possible for him to try to make a later transition into that +2 blink, but with a bit of an Immortal backbone, it can give him more staying power against the Roaches. Yeah,
absolutely against the Roaches. Against the Hydralisk is going to be a little bit more tricky, though. Zanster is going to try to get this probe, won't get it. That's actually rather infuriating for him, because if he would have been able to take out that probe, those pylons would have been later, and it's harder to create a good sim city on the high ground over there for Mana. I think that if I'm Zanster right now, I would just make as many Hydralisk as possible and try to push as quick as possible by seeing the way that my Protoss opponent has opened so far. Immortals, not phenomenal. These Lings are going to try to counter perhaps and going to try to cancel this Nexus, but that's not going to happen as all the sentries are here. Zanster has to be very careful. I wouldn't jump on those sentries. That's a few too many with that Immortal and the Mothership Core there.
Yeah, this Warp Prism is trying to move in towards that 3rd base mineral line. We do have Hydralisks in production.
That's scary, by the way. Imagine if those Hydras pop on the wrong moment. Mana could end up losing his Warp Prism.
Yeah, that War Prism is really all he has to try to keep Zanster back, and it has kept the Roaches back, but, you know, Kev, you said it, he's just building Hydra after Hydra, not really focusing on the Roaches. That will really help against the Immortals, but +2 and Blinker coming in, and he's still just building Immortals with them.
Yeah, the Stalker count is so extremely low at the moment, though, and I feel until the moment that wow, he's transferring so many probes. That's very uncommon, by the way, to transfer that many. He only leaves 8 probes in his natural expand. Most people will just leave 16 and then start working on this next base.
He's getting ready for Legacy of the Void, Kev, with how much fewer resources you have per base.
That's a good point. Let's take a look at the army supply right now. 71 against 40. I kind of like this push for Zanster, man. Especially with 3 gates that are on the way at the moment. Blink is only halfway down. +2 is only halfway down.
You know what? It raises the stakes too, because now if he kills a third, he gets so many more
I know. I was thinking about that as well. It's like losing the 3rd base is going to be extra painful now, because you won't just lose that, but you're going to lose so many workers there as well. He's setting himself up pretty strong, though. He could potentially Photon Overcharge both bases. He's sitting on the high ground, so he's going to rely on force fields. So this is very difficult to engage for Zanster, but Zanster has so much more that I can see this work. We're going to swap first person view over here. Mana is just looking on the other side of the map right now while he's going for a little bit of Warp Prism res. That's so ballsy, going for an offensive Warping right now, Nate.
Yeah, I mean, any moment now he could be pushed at that 3rd base, but really trying to use this Warp Prism to keep his opponent at home. And you know what, the few little bit of Lings and Roaches that are playing around at that 3rd that are coming back to defend, he's actually getting some serious work done. And
he's buying time for all those additional gateways to finish up so he can warp in more and more units. He doesn't know where the army is, and he's moving to the low ground right now, which I think is a rather risky move. Where is that army of Zanster? What has Zanster been waiting for? Why was he that worried about that Prism?
Yeah, you can really see that there's no map vision at the moment aside from that Warp Prism for Mana. Very risky for him.
Well, Zanster was setting himself up all along, and he's going to go for it. He's going to try to swarm this army, but there are a lot of sentries in the mix over here.
Yeah, I mean, here he comes right on through. He lets the Zerglings through, tries to force field the Hydralisks back. At least one of these Immortals in the front taking a lot of damage. And we see the first sentry picked off, 1 Immortal killed, and now just waiting, biding his time.
I still kind of like this engagement for Zanster. He picked up the Mothership Core. That is so huge. No double Photon Overcharge to fall back on. All these Immortals will fall, or at least 3 out of 4 have gone down so far, because the Hydra count is so high. Where are the Stalker numbers for Mana? Mana just needs a lot of Blink Stalkers right now.
And you know what? There haven't really been too many Blinks at the beginning of this engagement. The Hydras are going to be still pushed back a little bit, but all the sentries are gone. It's just pure Stalkers with an Immortal to anchor this army down.
He might be able to clean this up for now, but the reinforcements are coming along for Zanster. I still really like this for Zanster. He's going to get that final Immortal. All the sentries have gone down. It's 57 workers against 61. That Warp Prism is still alive on the other side of the map. Overall, I felt this was a pretty damn good trade because he killed 9 sentries, or let's say 8 sentries, and the Mothership Core and the Immortal. And I think the moment that Zanster collects all of his forces right now and goes again, I think it's very difficult for Mana to get a favorable trade or engagement.
Yeah, I mean, he's going for the +3 attack. He's going to rebuild the Mothership Core, grab another Immortal, but Zanster takes the 4th base, and he has that Spire complete, so he has the option to throw Mutas out if he wants.
Man, Mana going for another offensive warp in. Best defense is offense, Nate. It's a very ballsy move. There are still a couple of defensive Roaches around, but this is kind of nice, and it's also distracting Zanster. Zanster, as we can see in the minimap, is actually coming back with everything. I don't really like this Mutalisk switch, by the way, right now, Nate. I don't see the point. He's canceling them, right? Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Did he cancel all the Mutas? That's so smart, because switching into Mutalisk against a 3-base Protoss that has +3 Blink Stalkers while you have 0/0 Mutalisk, like, that's a very questionable decision.
Your opponent will already have a lot of anti-air in front of them, so.
And it's very smart though, because he's forcing additional defensive cannons. Where are those cannons being wiped?
Yeah, he doesn't want to take a chance for some Mutalisks.
That's smart play by Zanster, and instead he's going to go with more and more Hydras. But you want to keep the pressure on though. Don't give your opponent too much time, because if we reach that stage in the game where Mana will eventually get maybe Storm, which he would have already had if he didn't lose all these sentries, by the way. But with Storm and Force Fields, you're not going to lose against Hydralisk, unless your name is Rotterdam.
Yeah, those Hydralisks are very squishy. Mana's going to move out a little bit. He actually sees this army split in half, immediately grabs onto this little chunk on the west side, just needs to force field off. The rest of the army's going to come in though. No Mothership Core, no recall to escape if he gets caught.
I feel this trade was already good enough for Zanster. He doesn't even lose all that much, because that was not the majority of his army. He got another Immortal, he got most of the sentries. That's 600-700 additional gas. Here comes that Mothership Core. It's going to try to recall a couple of these units out, or no, he's just going to provide high ground vision, which I guess he had anyway, but yeah, Mana just lost way too much over there, Nate. 50 supply right now against 132. If I'm Zenster right now, I'm gonna go all out, man. I'm shoving all my units right in your face. You don't even need the best trade over here, but you're gonna kill these gateways, you're gonna kill a bunch of Stalkers, maybe a bunch of cannons, maybe a robotics facility. You're gonna trade phenomenally over here with these Hydralisks.
Yeah, I mean, the Roaches and Hydras just push straight in. More and more forces coming over to reinforce and help finish this army off. The sentries at the bottom of the ramp won't be able to do it either.
And I love the movement, by the way, of Zen's army over here. Often you see players just attack moving and then looking away. Did you see that? He was moving forward, shooting, moving forward, shooting. It's so difficult to micro your Blink Stalkers if the Roaches and Hydras are so damn close to your Stalkers, because by the time that they shoot, they kill your Stalkers immediately. And this was just great play, great execution by Zenster, and overall just a very, very good game by him. What a great way to bounce back after a very disappointing game won by him.
Yeah, he cleans up the natural, pushes into the main base now. These probes are running for the hills as the rest of the Stalkers try to make something happen, but there's not much to do for them as the Roaches Hydras. I guess those two cannons, they do something, but not enough.
They are not doing what they were supposed to do, Nate, and that is to help a little bit against a potential Muta switch that wasn't coming. And I really thought it was a brilliant mind game as well by Zenster. I think that overall he just hoped that Mana thought, wow, be careful with that, man. We've seen it in the past. I'm not sure if that was a dance or not, Nate.
Just stepping around?
Maybe. Let's just say that he was working on getting a better position on this Nexus.
I'd say as much as Mana drops to 32 supply versus 200. All is lost in game number 2 here for the Team Liquid Protoss. He's going to run his last Stalkers out. The GG will come. And Zanster ties the series up against his Polish enemy.
Yeah, very solid game by him, man. What a great way to bounce back. Often we see people, after they try to go for a rather funky build in game number 1, that they just kind of fall apart in game number 2 as well, you know. It gets to their head, is nervous, like, oh god, why did I do that build in game number 1? Like, you know, and then they stress themselves out further. But Zenster looking very, very composed over there and displaying a very solid game on what is considered to be a pretty tricky map for Zerg against Protoss.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you know, just pick your brain a little bit. What do you think came down to it more in that position? Was it where Mana set himself up, or did Zanster do something to really pull him around the first time he was able to pick the army off?
I feel a couple of things went wrong there. I'm not sure if Mana already had to be on the low ground. That's a questionable decision on its own.
Yeah.
Maybe he just thought that Zenster was truly retreated on the other side of the map. But I guess he just felt, I've got enough sentries over here, but I felt 1 or 2 sentries were a little bit too far in the front, that even though he dropped all those force fields, they were still getting hit by the Hydralisk, and that's why a couple of them got picked off. And I feel losing the Mothership Core also really hurts. That means no time warp on that army, and it also means no Photon Overcharge to fall back on. And yeah, I guess overall Mana just underestimated the strength of that Zerg army.
Yeah, I want to, especially what you said about not being sure where the army was. When we got to see the first-person view of Mana, he had no idea where the army was. The only thing he saw was his own base and where his Warp Prism was. And as nice as the Warp Prism was able to do a little damage here and there, the Roaches did a really good job of being able to defend, but just not able to hold it.
Nope. Score is 1-1 in our first series over here at WCS Premier League round of 16. We're heading to a very small commercial break, and after that we'll be back with game number 3 between Mana and Zenster.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the World Championship Series Premier League round of 16. It's season 3. It's the beginning of Group A. Kev, we're tied up 1 apiece.
Yep, a very interesting game so far. Zenster bringing a little bit of chatter in game number 1, but showing us a very solid game in game number 2. And something, Nate, I think we didn't really point out, but what we definitely should point out, is the way that he handled all that Warp Prism harass. He didn't really lose a whole lot. And, you know, we were kind of joking about saying maybe best defense is offense. But looking back at things, Mana could have used a couple of additional units at home to defend against that push.
Yeah, he was not enough map vision to hold it, but can he tie? Can he finish things up now that we're tied up here? It's game 3 between Mana and Zanster. We're going to play this one out on Iron Fortress here at the World Championship Series. He took game 1, he held that cheddar, as you said, very well, but couldn't make it happen in game 2. Can he do it here? He's Team Liquid's Mana.
Favorite among most of the commentators over here, Nate, and of course statistically speaking he was a favorite, but this man has been making some waves for himself over the last few months. Had a great season already and he wants to continue it. It is Zenster. I must say, Nate, in all the interviews, Zenster comes across as a very likable guy as well. I feel he's pretty damn well spoken and he seems to be just very enthusiastic, not just about StarCraft, but about the whole esports experience altogether.
Yeah.
It's very refreshing to see.
It's important to keep in mind that as fun as it is to come out and compete and play games and whatnot, you still get the opportunity to go around and see new places, you know, and enjoy all of it.
And he definitely seems to be the type of guy that enjoys going to new places.
It's like some people are like, well, it's like you didn't. It's like, tell me big tournaments. Everyone's like, no, I got to see the world. You know, I got to go do really cool stuff, and that's the real joy in it. You know, there's so many things you can do with yourself, but you really get to get the full experience here at the World Championship Series. It's tied 1-1 though. You know, and we talked about this. The guys at the desk mentioned it earlier. This map, what makes it so tricky for Mana?
It's just that Iron Fortress is very difficult for Protoss to go up to 3 bases. Fonka is showing us as well. He's heard us have this couple of speech a couple of times, but look at the amount of distance there is. Look at the amount of open area there is over here. 3-4 force fields are not going to keep you safe, Nate. You have to be very careful about how you want to spread your units or how many units you want to send to a potential 3rd base or not. And if Zerg decides to mass out on units, when they cut a little bit of economy, it can become very, very difficult for Protoss to keep those sentries safe. That's why a lot of Protoss players prefer to go for a big 2-base play. Then again, because so many people do it, Zerg start to get ready for it, and the moment that your 2-base play fails, unless your name is Elfie, most of the time the game is over.
So a lot of it comes down to either making that 2-base play or baiting the Zerg into thinking that you're going to make that 2-base play.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just kind of tricky in general to go up to 3 bases for multiple reasons. It's difficult to transfer units, it's difficult to transfer probes, it's difficult to get a very good SimCity going on the high ground. So it's not impossible. We've seen Protoss players win plenty of times on Iron Fortress. You know, if it was that difficult, people at home, of course, would be wondering, like, well, why don't Protoss players just veto it? Because the other maps are a little bit worse. This is playable. It's absolutely not super imbalanced or anything. But as we've often said, Nate, there's a reason why there is a big Zerg logo in the middle of the map.
Yeah.
It's kind of their home, man.
Yeah, that's definitely a good maps for Zergs, especially with just that large distance that you can get. Also rewarding the creep spread that can go on.
A little bit of
other
Proto
matchups.
boost going down on the Warp Gate technology over there, so we could very well see 2 or maybe even 3 gateways go down on the low ground. I kind of think dropping 2 gates on the low ground is best, and then dropping 1 in the back of your main base if you want to go for some 4-gate pressure. But I think, let me just double check that real quick, but I'm pretty damn sure that Mana scouted the Extractor early game. Yes, he did. And most Protoss players don't like to go for 3 or 4-gate pressure against a Zerg that open up with speed.
Yeah, and just the maneuverability of Zerglings against pushes like this is just really strong. So now I ask then, where does he go from here? Does he try to make it, is a fast 3rd play viable when on the map, even when it's normally so difficult, just to try to secure it early on?
Yeah, I mean, like, there are many ways to go up to 3 bases, right? And define fast. Like, is it smart to do this at the 6 minute and 20 seconds mark? Well, probably not. I would do it a little bit later. This could very well be for a proxy Stargate, and I know that my dear friend Johan Mello is a very big fan of that, because it's kind of tricky to scout as a Zerg player, and you will check, you see the gateways, and often Oracle is just the last thing they expect. This could very well be a double Oracle into a 6 or 7 gate all-in, which I think is a very strong build on this map, and we've seen a lot of Korean Protoss players use that build as well.
I'm impressed at how thoroughly you've dissected this. No proxy
just
structure.
Zealots.
That's a long way for Zealots to go.
Yeah.
I feel like he's expecting a fast third base. Or I guess if he builds a third there, he should find something.
I'm very surprised that he's wiping in 3 Zealots over there, Nate. Like you said, it's very hard. Maybe he's going to wipe in 6 Zealots and then run them towards the third base. There we have 6 Zealots. And I mean, this could potentially work. It would be an absolutely brilliant play. But by the way that Zenser has played, Zenser didn't rush up to 3 bases, right? He took his third hatchery rather late, so it doesn't have that much HP. Right now, Zenser has a single Ling out on the map. He's not expecting this. As silly as this may have looked, Nate, I absolutely think that this is going to work. And he could potentially even recall out these Zealots. Wow. This is not a play that I see very frequently on Iron Fortress, but this is just going to... Is he going to ignore it? Is he going to go for the natural instead? Is he going to go for links?
I guess he really wants to do a lot of damage with this. The Mothership Core is going to come up with this push as the Zealots start to move in, but Mana's going to step back, realizing, it's like, okay, your speed is done. I don't know that I can actually go on creep.
And then Zenser just doesn't really have a whole lot of units on the way. He has 6 roaches on the way right now, but I think those roaches are going to hatch a little bit too late to save the day. So in the end, Mana will still get the cancel on this hatchery, which is absolutely what you want to get done over here. That's interesting, because
He warped in another 3 Zealots as well.
That's a lot of Zealots though. Like, this could go 2 ways. Like, this is great. Canceling a third base against Zerg is always great, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, he's sitting with an army right now that's 26 army supply, but the majority of it is absolutely useless against Roaches and Hydras. Zealots without charge against Roach Hydra, well, he's just not gonna kill a whole lot of units against a great Zerg player like Zenster.
Yeah, especially once you get, either the Hydralisks on creep, which are very fast, or even Roaches on creep can do it. But you get Roach speed and you get Hydralisk speed off creep without charge, right? The Zealots will never be able to close that distance to actually hit those Roaches and Hydralisks.
Very interesting game, not the way that I see most PvZs play out on Iron Fortress, and I kind of wonder, Mana must feel kind of okay about this scenario, but at the same time, if I was Mana, Nate, I wouldn't be super happy with all these slow Zealots right now. I guess they're better than dead Zealots, but at the same time, they still won't contribute a whole lot. Yeah. Then again, Zenser did make a bunch of links behind all those Roaches, so the Zealots will do okay against the links.
I guess the idea is he's going to be hoping that he can trade them out as effectively as possible. And with some of the ways that the ramps on this map work, if he can try to get a fight at a choke point where he can at least force field those Hydras or Roaches in close, then the Zealots can maybe get something done.
It's still meat shield as well, right?
Yeah.
Link's running around trying to prevent Mana from going up to 3 bases. Mana is currently on 46 workers, but I do feel after the start that he had that he actually wants to go up to 3 bases. But here we already see it. Funka showed us in the start of the game. Where do you put your units, Nate? And not a cannon is going down. That's a defensive cannon. Now that kind of makes me wonder. Well, I guess he still wants to go up to 3 bases, but most of the time you wait a little bit with these cannons.
I guess it's possible he's concerned about a run by or like some other type of push, and he can warp something in very quickly to help defend, but he wants the cannon there to actually kill whatever pushes him.
So how do you feel about this game right now? Because of course Mana slowed down the economy of Zenser a little bit, but he didn't really kill any drones. The only thing he did is force a cancel, which means it took Zenser a little longer to saturate that third base. But how much did that truly slow him down?
I feel like the way that he pushed the third base as well makes it a lot easier for him to make an attack. Like the fourth base, there's still that pylon in the northeast. He can do harass later on with the Zealots, but that third base of Zenser is so close that if he does a push with +2, he can get right up in his face.
Yeah, like I'm happy that you pointed out. Zenser did take out one of those pylons, because I think there was another pylon.
Yeah, there's still one in the northeast base.
Yeah, that's very... I guess it's kind of hard to find that one, but eventually you could say, if you have speed links, just rally one speed link across the map and see what's going on.
Yeah, and this Phoenix is going to try to scout around, get a feel for what exactly he's up against. Good amount of Hydralisks, so he knows it's going to come down to that blink control, man. Those Hydras shredded the Stalkers in the last game.
But this time I feel that Mana's going to have way more Stalkers to work with by the time that they actually fight. Mana is for now the one that's moving forward. He's already going up to Templar Archives and a War Prism. I think that's a tiny bit ambitious, because there's a very good chance that Zenser is going to be the one. Man, if Mana actually wants to step on creep here, I think that's not a very wise decision. Well, he gets 2 Hydras, that's nice. 2 Hydras for almost nothing. At the same time, a couple of Zealots over here on the left side, but they see that army on the high ground. And I think it would be very wise for Mana right now to just go home. I mean, I kind of like what he's doing over here. He's giving Zenser the idea that he wants to attack, but meanwhile he's buying time for himself to get Storm out. Even just 3 or 4 Psy Storms will completely change the tide of that battle.
Yeah, and if you look at the setup, just the way that they're posturing, no infestation period, can't go in for any late game tech. All he has is Roach Hydra Link, and with so many Zerglings here, suddenly that this is like a really weird spot because Storm will obliterate everything.
Yep. But if Zenster,
Even Archon would be really good against this.
If Zenster would know what we know right now, then he would absolutely just go for it immediately. And at the same time, he already kind of wants to go for it because he's close to being maxed out. And I kind of like this. Look at the way that he's splitting himself up. This is very difficult for Mana to defend. First potent overcharge is going to go down immediately. A couple of Zerglings will run through. A gateway will be unpowered. Man, this is tricky for Mana. What a great timing for Zenster over here. Storm is only halfway done, and he doesn't know that. But this is just a phenomenal moment for Zenster to go for this attack.
Yeah, the War Prism's going to try to make a counterplay. 3 Zealots were sent to the 4th base as well, but that natural expansion nexus being worked on. I would have liked to see some Lings trying to get into the main base. Storm is very close to finishing. Don't pull back. Don't use the F2 key.
No, don't use that F2 key. At least not right now. One Queen gets picked off immediately. Zenster has very high APM, so General's multitasking is good. Storms will go down.
A lot of the Zerg forces get on top of the sentries, though. A few of them are picked off very quickly, and there's still a lot of Zerg left to kill for this Protoss army.
Yeah, absolutely. Force fields are very good though. The Stalk is doing a lot of work on the high ground, but there are so many reinforcements on the way. There are still a couple of Zealots being annoying, but I don't think it really compares to the amount of damage that Zenster has done on the other side of the map. Even though those Zealots are true champs, they're really going to town. But the Robo is going to get picked off. A lot of probes are going to fall over here. Eventually, maybe the Cybercore could get sniped. That would be a great pick-off. Imagine if he picks off the Cybercore right now, Nate.
Yeah, considering that your army is Blink Stalkers, you need that Cybernetics core to keep putting those out. And despite all of this, he grabs this hatchery. He's actually barely killed any drones, not more than 4 or 5 this game. Yeah. So the economic damage isn't there to slow down Zenster from just reinforcing and reflooding.
I think the supply tells the tale right now of this game. 199 against 110. Mana's going to get a couple of additional High Templars, and Storm is great. But when you're down this much in army supply, it's very hard for Storm to make up for it, especially because there are a lot of Roaches in the mix as well, right? And Roaches, they can almost bathe in Storms, man. Like, this kind of tickle them. They don't really do a whole lot. And like I said, Storm is great, but you need more than just a few Storms. The one Immortal will get picked off as well. That's going to make these Roaches even better. Storm goes down on top of the probes as well.
Yeah, this is just really tough. Zenster wants to take the first series here against the Polish Protoss of Mana, and I think he's going to be able to do it. 1 base now for the Team Liquid Protoss player, blinking back, trying to run, but nothing to reinforce with.
5 series in a row, Mana defeated Zenster, but here in WCS Premier League round of 16, perhaps the biggest series that these two players have played against each other, it seems like Zenster is the one that will move forward to the winner bracket match. Of course, he's not out of the group just yet. There is another very exciting best of 3 ahead of him for him later today, but this was a very good performance, and GG is called. Zenster takes the first series of the day. He played very well, man.
Really impressive performance by Zenster in today's match.
Yep, loved everything about it.
A fantastic start for Zenster today. Turns it around and is now going through to the winner's match. Mana gets stunned in the first game of the day, Jeff.
Yeah, the first game was a little bit of a gimme. I think Mana had a good defense, but it was kind of a weird, bad attack from Zenster. Zenster then balanced it out and went for Roach Hydra and pretty much dominated Mana, so it's going to be back to the drawing board.
Yeah, we'll look at some replay analysis in a quick second here and go into that more detail. But Todd, was that the result that we expected? Because when we looked at the predictions, there was only 2 people that actually picked Zenster to win.
Perhaps Rotti and Kala they know the European scene a lot better than some of us thought, Jeff.
Even lightning strikes twice sometimes, is what I would say with that. Sometimes it does.
It's not a good start for us, though, is it, when we're looking at the predictions, which we'll go into very, very shortly here. Sad to say that, but let's talk about Mana. He came into this super motivated. This is a massive game for him. He knew what was ahead of him, and unfortunately now he has to wait until Thursday to play. Remember, for some of you just tuning in now, is the decider matches, the elimination matches get played on Thursday. Today we only cover Game 1, Game 2, and the winner's match of Group A. So Zenster will play again today, but not the best of starts for Mana.
Yeah. Definitely some tough games, though, if you think about all that happened. In particular, I feel that second game, he didn't necessarily have to be in a bad spot, but a few mishaps put him in a dicey situation, and then he reacted wrong, didn't scout enough.
All right, Jeff, here is the moment. So just before we begin this, Mana moved out very, very early with Zealots, killed the 3rd, thought he was in a decent position to build up to an attack. This was the attack that he moved for, but he had second thoughts.
It's a tough map to do this. I mean, we talk about the third base being kind of the linchpin moment where it's really hard to secure that. He's got that in his, he's got that going for him. But look at where he's moving out to. This is a very wide open space. And Xanster's already pre-setting up saying, yeah, okay, come on up on this high ground where I have army. Go up on that creep like the broadcasts were talking about. All of these are bad points of attack, and Mana just kind of ends up backing away from this. Meanwhile, look at that supply for Xanster. It's getting further and further ahead.
Yep.
And when you attack with Roach Hydra, you're all of a sudden losing those high critical units like Sentries and Immortals for the Protoss.
I think the big problem here for Mana is that when you're in this situation, you shouldn't go for a War Prism and High Templars, because if you do that, then you're going to have a lot less Stalkers, and army supplies, you're going to fall very far behind and die to Roach Hydra. Against no Hive, you don't need High Templars.
And as you can see here, Todd, Mana backed out of the attack, pulled back, as you said, went for the tech choices he chose, but everything had crumbled. He missed his opportunity, and now he's left on an attack that he just couldn't deal with.
You can do those kind of tactics on a map where it gets really narrow in front of the natural, or if they attack up into the third, it's very easily defended by a few force fields and perhaps a couple of storms. But in this situation, look at how wide open that space is. And Xanster's so patient about saying, okay, part of my army is going to go into that natural, but I'll wait for the big thing, which is to try to get your army to come down that ramp.
Even the War Prism across the map here, that's going to warp in some Zealots, that's wrong. Against this kind of attack, all you need to do is defend, and then you've won. I mean, if you do comfortably, then you've won the game.
But, I mean, Mana cut his economy so hard to build up to that attack, and when he never took the attack, he didn't have the economy to have a big enough army, Todd.
Yeah, that was also one of the big problems, and which I think was caused by the fact that he went for High Templars. That in itself, and the way that Xanster reacted here, the fact that he went straight for the army and got close up and didn't let force fields affect the fight too much at first, that was the biggest of deals as well. Xanster reacted so well, he knew this was his one timing and he went for it.
Yeah, beautiful game 3 there, and that gave us the Xanster versus Mana win for the Swedish player here. And he didn't buckle under the pressure, he wasn't nervous, he went down in game number 1 against the favorite here, and he turned it around, and he looked great.
It's incredible, and he actually kind of threw himself down in game number 1. It was kind of a silly thing that Mana reacted very coolly to, and Xanster just kind of gave game number 1 away. And when that happens, a lot of times players are like, oh god, it's all over. But he just went back to his tried and true strats, and honestly, he kind of steamrolled Mana. Those game 2 and 3 was not that close at all.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll hear more of you throughout the day. That is it for game 1 of Group A, which leads us going into game 2 of Group A, and that's coming just after this break. It's going to be Marine Lord taking on Elfie.